Okay, so now we're going to talk about funding factory if there was no SPV and how the Spanish equity release thing would work. And essentially, funding factory without an SPV is not funding factory. It's a clunky piece of crap that's really difficult to operate. It's onerous in terms of its administration, and it's simply not a scalable model, and I'll explain why. So let's look again at the customer sausage factory. We've got guys coming in here who are very interested in engaging in Spanish equity release, and they're going to our friends in our originator, and this is Property Solutions. Property Solutions. And they're saying, you know what, we're interested in becoming customers of yours, but we want to find out what the deal is. So we've got people making inquiries and eventually deciding, yeah, it sounds like it could be for me. And all the way to customer N. Okay, now over on the funding factory side of things, SPVs haven't been invented, and it's a very sad and sorry world. So we have a lot of people who want to avail of this equity release program, but we have to find money from somewhere. So we've got a couple of options for ourselves. We can approach one or two very wealthy individuals, so high net worth individuals, say ×2, and these big time guys, these big time investors, they're going to come along and they may stump up a very large amount of money, say 10 million, and this guy might put in 20 million. And basically you're going to have people coming in and they're directly funding the whole thing. So they're basically, these people are coming along, the money is sitting around there, the 30 million is sitting around there, and these guys, they give the bare ownership to these investors, and in exchange the investors give cash back. And so this is bare ownership, and then lucre, cash, and cash. Okay, so you can be lucky and you can get a couple of guys who are interested in this, and they'd be interested in it on the basis of the model we've already created around equity release. They'd be interested in a particular return on investment, and we're looking at yields, they can be anywhere from 6 to about 9 to 10%, which is good. Low risk, yeah, because essentially we're just waiting for the bare ownership title to convert into full title to execute a sale, and that process of conversion is a legally well-established process, and therefore there's no counterparty credit ratings having to go on. It's very, very cut and dry. The title is vesting with the high net worth individual. Now, there's problems with this process here. Firstly, these guys are rare. These high net worth individuals who are willing to stump up 10 or 20 million. They're relatively speaking a rare commodity out there. it's far better to go for a mass market, and it's far better to go for something that's not really that bumpy in terms of yield. Like this is a yearly yield based over the lifetime of the bare ownership titles that a $20 million investor or a $10 million investor would have. But the sales affected after the deaths have converted the bare ownership into a full ownership title. Those sales might happen, say, you've got 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You might have nothing. All of the people who engage in this might be in full health for 4 or 5 years, and suddenly you get a slew of people. So you get a slew of people dying then in the 4th year, and you get a flow of 2 million. And then say year 5, 6, nothing, then year 7, and you get another slew of people dying. You get 3 million out of that experience. And essentially what you're getting is very, very irregular, very irregular flows, and you don't have a secondary market, so you can't really get out of it, and you're bound in. So basically what you have is you have a high cost of entry. Disadvantage, so you've got to put a fair old whack of money in, and you also have hard to exit, and of course because it's got a high cost of entry, it's hard to enter as well, and because it's just all around it doesn't really work out too well. So you'd also have a finite market in the sense that there's a lot of high net worth individuals out there who, but there's even more opportunities than there are individuals, and you very quickly run out of perspectives, even if you're giving fairly good rates of return, but your rates of return are going to be very sporadic. So say for instance, in year 3 you haven't paid a penny, and you're suddenly looking for another 50 million investment, and they're going to ask, okay, how's the thing performed so far? And you're going to say, well, we think there's flows in the future, but you know what, we're not too sure. So that's a real turn off right there. The other model then, which is even more cumbersome, is basically teaming up smaller investors with the individual titles. So let me just draw that now. So I'll just get rid of all of this stuff here. So now this model, so we've got ordinary guys. And instead of the 1 or 2 big time investor dudes, instead we've got like loads of people here. And what these guys are interested in is getting a single title. And so what happens then is that Property Solutions, the originator, comes along, and it basically tries to sync a customer of the Spanish equity thing up with an investor who wants to buy the title to that property. Okay, and that involves a lot of toing and froing. Here's a property portfolio, Mr. Investor number 1, and here's a property portfolio investor number 2. What would you like from that? And so on and so forth. And it becomes like you give them a list or menu of properties that you currently have, and they go and they view all of these things, and maybe they like them, maybe they don't. And if they do like them, and they have to basically fork out 60% of the market price. So not only do you have to get a customer who's willing to sell, but you then need to get an investor who's willing to buy that specific property. And this just becomes all of the toing and froing here, the viewing, the looking at stuff, and then the eventual cash over to the originator, and then the cash to the customer in the end. It just gets really cumbersome. There's a lot, it's an emotional decision on the part of the investor. They're investing to an extent, but they're also buying a place as well. It's messy. So that particular thing there becomes really, really hard to scale. And also somebody's buying into something that they might have in 2 years if this customer dies, or might have in 20 years if this customer dies. And it's also something that they can't sell on. So they're locked into it. So just say Spanish property tanks, or say they get a bad decision in a court and they have to fork out money. And that money is locked up it's locked up in their bare ownership title, and it's only through selling that they would be able to redeem the funds, and there would be all sorts of charges against that. It's a very illiquid asset. So for all those reasons, trying to align the stars between the customer and the investor on a one-to-one basis with the bare ownership title, I just don't think it will work at all. And it's as I've said, it could be 2 years, it could be 20 years. Hell, you might get a 72-year-old who lives to 102, so you're waiting 30 years before you get before you can actually sell the apartment or house, or before you can take possession of it. So I mean, it's just not attractive. And during that time, you might also have the property market might tank several times. God knows what could happen. We could have an alien invasion or something, something real kind of force majeure could happen, and that would completely destroy your investment. So that's why without an SPV, we're really into quite a good deal of difficulty. It becomes extraordinarily cumbersome as a proposition. So that's why we should go with an SPV. So I've now done SPV with and without, and these videos are kind of going on for about 10 minutes. I'm then going to do a worked example from the customer, a worked example from the investor, and I'll try and keep those to 2 minutes apiece. And finally, I'm going to run through where the money is generated, and the fees and the margins, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the security structures that we possibly want to implement coming out the back of the SPV. So thank you.